Welcome to the Last in Line podcast, where we discuss faith, hope, and truth in the lives of amazing servant leaders. You are in the right place if you crave purpose and if you hunger for a life of significance. This podcast applies biblical truth to our daily lives, and we pray that you walk away encouraged and inspired. This is the Last in Line podcast.
Hey, we're honored to bring you some good news. Recent development in our sponsorship programs. We are now partnering with Christ Coffee, who is an online business that is working to save children from sex trafficking, and they are spreading the gospel throughout the world. Christ Coffee is more than just a brand. It is a movement where each cup is a testament to their commitment to high quality beans, the spread of the gospel, and making a tangible impact in the community and around the world. For those of you that don't know, which I know all of you do, trafficking of any kind, of kids, adults, men, women, is a major epidemic. More than 1 million children are being exploited, and you can actually make a dent in that in a good way, and help take a part in setting some of those kids free when you shop at Christ Coffee. 10% of every sale is donated to the rescue of children and the spread of the gospel. Their mission, guys, we can partner with that. And each cup you brew actually does go to saving a child. So they're actually blessing us and our customers, our listeners, with a discount. So type in Last in Line and you'll get 10% off of your first order. And it is quality premium coffee beans. Gentlemen, the dark roast is some of the best I've ever had. So don't wait. Go to Christ Coffee, order your first bag, use Last in Line for 10% off that first order, and I guarantee you'll keep coming back. Brew a cup, rescue a child with Christ Coffee. Hey, gentlemen, pleasure to bring you Joshua Broome today. He needs no introduction because many of you have heard him on several other podcasts or have read his book that released in March called 7 Lies That Will Ruin Your Life. Joshua was a child of a broken home, raised by his mom, spent a life as a kid feeling unwanted, unworthy, chasing that thing that would make him feel accepted or validated or affirmed in his life, and became an athlete, was defined by all the things he could accomplish or do rather than who he really was. And so he started to believe this narrative that became a lie in his mind, which ultimately got him into seeking validation through modeling and acting. Moved to Los Angeles. He was noticed by some of the wrong people, it turns out, and engaged in the adult film industry, and was hired to be a star in pornography film, and did that for several years until he realized that accomplishing the pinnacle in that field and all the money that he could ever spend really made him feel worse. And coming to the end of his rope, facing thoughts of suicide, he met somebody, and I'll let him tell you the story, but met a woman in a bank teller as he was depositing a check from his pornography film, and she changed his life, opened his eyes. And so we talk a lot about what is vacant within somebody, what the deficit might be that would lead somebody into that line of work, or similar pursuits over validation that really are trying to fill a void that only Christ can fill. We talk about men, what they're chasing, why they're chasing it, the pornography industry, the actual harm that really is done, and the people that are sought out to use for those films, and just modern day slavery of sex trafficking. We talk about men who talk themselves into thinking that it is a victimless sin, which it turns out it really is not. and some of the things that how it's destructive in men and why they're seeking intimacy in the wrong areas and their misguided definition of intimacy. And so we talk a lot about breaking free from that sexual sin and temptation. We talk about his life and how he redefined identity in Christ and meeting his wife, understanding what the true gospel was. And now he's doing that line of work. He's talking to churches, athletic teams. He's speaking at conferences, and he wrote this book, Seven Lies That'll Ruin Your Life, that we talk about. So we go all over the map today. It's pretty extensive and thorough topics that we cover, but it's empowering and it's enlightening to see the clarity that this can bring to men, to teenagers, to Christians. Who are hiding this, who are justifying this particular sin of pornography and masturbation. And we talk about how to get free of that and what really needs to happen in a man's life. So with that, help me welcome Joshua Broome to Last in Line Podcast. All right, Joshua Broome, we finally did it, man. Welcome to Last in Line Podcast.
Yeah, man. I about put my eye out last week. I missed a spot around our in our front yard weed eating. I thought, well, I'll just run out there real quick and knock that out before church. And I about got knocked out real quick before church.
Yeah.
I got
that
popped
did not
in the
look
eye.
pretty. That did not look good, man. Well,
Yeah.
You look fine now, and everything's healed up nicely. That'll teach you not to do any manual labor outdoors, man.
Yeah.
Did you
Well,
learn
I
your
always tell
lesson?
my kids like the importance of wearing, helmets when they're on bicycles. And it's like I normally, throw some shades on when I weed eat just in case, but my kids were playing in the mulch or whatever, and I didn't.
Yeah.
I wasn't prepared. And
Well, you live to fight another day, it looks like. Man, we tried to we've been trying for months to make this work, and you're a hard man to catch, and rightly so. We're excited to have you here because I've heard you on several shows, and I'm familiar with your book that came out, I want to say maybe March of this year.
March 6th. Yeah,
Yeah.
March 6th.
So it's been out a bit, and I know it's just been crazy for you, probably a whirlwind of visits and speaking engagements and podcasts. So we're certainly glad to have you. But man, I would hate to start this out just like everybody else, but I feel like we might want to lessen,
Who the heck
maybe
is this guy?
the blow for guys. No, I would bet they all know you. But man, tell me, because we'll get into your story, of course, in the book, of course, but the more I listen to you, the more I feel like your story is more about choosing the right identity in Christ and your faith than it is just a guy who survived sexual temptation and sin, and your story being so centered around the sexual adult film industry and that kind of thing. Like, I feel like you're really the crux of your message, and correct me if I'm wrong, is the identity piece, the what we stand on piece. Talk more about what you hope it to be.
Yeah, I mean, the thing that I'm most excited about in the immediate future is, I'm speaking to 15,000 students at Liberty University next Friday, and that's what I'm preaching on, identity. And you were 100% right. So my story started with me feeling as if I wasn't good enough because I lived in a town, super small town, that my father lived in, but he was never the father in my life. And because I could see him, he was never, malicious to me, but he didn't choose me. And because he didn't choose me, the way neurologically that your brain works, specifically as a kid and even as an adult, the way that you resolve conflict is that you create a narrative. If someone doesn't come in and help you understand what you're feeling, then your brain creates a narrative. And then even if it's a lie, you believe that lie to be true, and you live as if that lie is truth. And what I believed was there must be something wrong with me, or I must not be good enough. So that thing, as a man, we all share this attribute that we have a high achiever personality, and that drives us to do good things for the glory of God. It causes us to, operate in excellence, to finish the job, to work hard, to push through, to have perseverance. But through a broken lens, it can cause you to believe, well, if I do enough, or if I have enough, or if people say that I'm enough, I will feel as if I'm enough.
Mm.
And that was the thing propelled me throughout my life. But yeah, like regarding identity, I had an identity crisis because I was, fatherless, and I didn't have the guidelines or the guardrails that I needed. And then my identity became, the only thing that I clung to was that I was my mother's son, because that was the one person that never failed me. That was the thing that I was most sure of. And then I hurt her when, I went into the adult film industry. And when I did that and I hurt the only person that never hurt me, well, I thought, well, okay, I'm already less than, and now the only thing that I had that was good, that was pure, I ruined that. So I must just be, someone who ruins things. This is just who I am. And I lived in the avalanche of the feelings of I'm worthless. And then I was, the way that I was trying to, grasp for air was, well, if I accomplish enough, if I, make enough money, if I have the right car, the right watch, enough commas in my bank account, the same thing that every man struggles with, because comparison is a thief of joy, and the enemy wants to kill, steal, and destroy your life. He wants to rob you from the abundance that Christ offers in him. But we can all struggle with that, regardless if you know Christ or if you don't. Because even as a follower of Jesus, you look on Instagram and you see the truck that you want that you don't have, you feel inadequate. Or you see, my wife, for example, she sees a family photo where all the kids are sitting pretty and smiling, and she's like, man, we cannot get a photo because we have 4 young kids. We can't get a photo with all 4 kids looking and smiling at the camera. It's impossible.
Yeah.
And she's like, am I not a good enough mom? Why won't they listen? Why won't they do this one thing? And it's like, it's so easy to minimize all of your wins and just weigh yourself based on one loss. And we do that time after time. But that was my story. And you're 100% right. Like our identity is born out of our belief. It's like who you believe Jesus to be is the most important thing about you. And that bleeds into your behavior. And for me, I believed that I was broken and not worthy of a father. And I had done all these bad things, and they were accessible by the world. And so everything I thought about myself was external, but those things internally overflowed into my behavior. So yeah, 1,000%.
Well, that's great. I mean, it's exciting that you have that scheduled to speak at Liberty. What a great school, man. What a great opportunity. And what a great message they need, that group needs to hear as well. But I like, to your point of narratives, I think in teenagers and maybe even younger, but I'll just go with teenagers, young 20s, like our narrative is a lot dependent on the affirmation and validation we get from other people. Like I've heard teenagers say, I'll go off of what my peer group says over what my parents say 100% of the time. And so they're super swayed by that group. And to the point of the career you chose early on in the adult film industry, like that's this counterfeit validation, right? But it's still validation, and it still meant something. And so it confirmed this, or actually it redefined this narrative in your mind that, oh, wait, people do want me. Oh, wait, I am valid, validated. So I guess take us through just briefly, I guess, how you even, I don't know that you just knew somebody that did that for a living and you're like, wow, you drive a nice car. How did you get it? Or what took you to that industry? How did you get there?
Yeah. So I started modeling and acting when I was 13, had a lot of success doing that. Went to college for theater, studied theater, started doing that. And then I moved to Hollywood when I was 21 and got an agent, and I was more successful as a model than an actor, which was frustrating because like modeling was kind of like, I like doing it, but I love acting, but I'm doing better at modeling. It's kind of like, in high school and middle school, I was a great baseball player, but I loved basketball. Where it's like, so I
Mm-hmm.
chose to put all my eggs in the basketball basket, even though baseball became easier to me. And it's kind of the same thing where it's like I loved acting, but modeling I had more success in, putting less effort into, which was frustrating. But I was in Hollywood doing that, and then essentially, three headhunters approached me in Hollywood at a bar, and there were three girls that so they would essentially they send out pretty girls that are associated with the porn industry, and there's agencies that send them out, and they essentially ask, girls and guys, hey, would you ever be interested in doing porn? If so, I would love for you to meet with our agent. So you set up a meeting with an agent. And I was like, this is weird, but if I'm honest, I didn't have a good reason to say no. And when you don't have a good reason to say no, sometimes you say yes to something you should say no to because you didn't have a solidified reason to say no. But I was like, what could it hurt? So I had this meeting with his agent, and he was pretty straightforward, asked me three questions. How did I grow up? What am I doing in LA, and what do I hope to accomplish? And I said, I'm out here. Well, I answered the question, how did I grow up? I was like, pretty much just me and my mom. So he's fishing for ammunition. So here's, okay, you come from a broken home. You're searching for something you don't have. Perfect candidate. So it should have been a red flag, but I didn't have the awareness to know that. And then, I'm in LA trying to do the same thing that, 75% of the people out there are trying to make it in some kind of creative space. And interestingly enough, the third thing I said, the thing that I was trying to accomplish was I guess I want to be famous. And the most interesting thing about that is that, famous and rich are both vague because there's not a solidified metric attached to it. Because what equates to being famous? Like how many followers or how many people need to know your name to equate to famous? Or the same thing like rich, like what dollar amount equates to rich? And because it's subjective, it's never obtainable, because it's really a figment of your imagination. And it's this belief that if I have what I think this might be, I will feel how I don't feel now. And, I was really searching for, hey, I want to be needed. I want to be known, and I want to feel chosen. And he was like, great, I can give you all that. I can give you all that. I can make you famous. You have acting experience, the porn industry at this time. They were parodying a lot of movies. So they were making, kind of like a pornographic version of, whatever film that was popular. So he's like, man, that would really, you're a good looking guy. That would lend you the opportunity to be the star in all these films. So I heard a counterfeit version of what I was actually pursuing. And I thought, well, maybe I'm just not good enough to make it in real acting. Maybe this could be an opportunity for me to make it there. And I knew it was a bad idea. Like I knew it. Like I was just waiting on my mom to like pop out in, judo chop throat. Like my mom, good Southern mama, she would have, she would have cracked my head, if she'd known I was there. But I said yes to something I should have said no to. And again, I didn't count the cost. And when you don't count the cost, you get burnt. And I did one film thinking that it wouldn't be that big of a deal. It went somewhat viral. And, someone who lives in a small town can relate to this. It only takes one person to know one thing about your life, for everyone to know everything about your life. And someone saw, me on this very popular website, and then they told somebody, and then they told somebody, then my uncle found out about it. Then my uncle told my mom. And then all of a sudden I'm having a really, embarrassing conversation with her. And at the end of that conversation, I had hurt the only person that never hurt me. So again, in your brain, like she was trying to say, hey, why did you do that? Because you're better than that. But what I heard, I couldn't hear through my shame. All I could feel was that I let her down. I blew it. So sometimes, like when you're in the middle of that, you can't even hear, someone's not being accusatory. They're not condemning you. They're just saying,
Yeah.
hey, why did you make that decision? Like, you're better than that. And
Hmm.
I'm not saying you're ruined now. What I'm saying is, I value you and see capacity within you that is beyond the decision that you made.
Yeah.
You got it
Wow.
wrong.
Mhm.
Um, but all I heard was, I blew it. And for me, it's almost like I proved myself right and that
Mhm.
I'm no good. I'm worthless. Of course, you hurt your mom. So what I did was I created the narrative in my head was, well, I've now disqualified myself from being a good son. So I'm doing her a favor by distancing myself from her.
Yeah.
And then at the same time, when you're in this crossroads, like when you blow it, the easiest thing to do is continue doing the thing that landed you in the place that you are,
Yeah. I was going to say you just double down on it, which
Yeah.
then doubles down on your shame, which then it's just a vicious cycle at that point.
Yeah. I mean, that's the most dangerous thing about a lie. I mean, that's what my book's about. Like, if you
Yeah.
believe a lie to be true, it becomes as if it's true to you, and you live through the worldview of that lie being truth. And if you live through, looking through a broken lens, it's going to equate to a broken life. And
Yeah. Yeah.
so I believed, okay, well, I blew it. This is, yeah, I made my bed. I got a lie in it. So while I'm here, I might as well, do the best that I can. And that's just who I am, for good or for bad. That was always who I
Yeah.
was.
Yeah.
Like, and it's neat to look back on, because like Romans 8:28, like all means all, like Hebrew, Greek, English, all means all.
Yeah. Yeah.
So in the same way, like God redefined, repurposed, reshaped my personality, yet it stayed the same in that I was always someone, I never give 80%. I always give
Yeah.
110%, for good or for bad, like chicken wings or studying the Bible, like,
Mhm. Yeah.
keg stands in a fraternity,
Right.
or, evangelizing in the street. It's like, that's all I know, because that's who I am. And so in the same way, like I was successful in the porn industry, it was like I doubled down, and like there were glimmers of good things about my personality, because the reason that I was so successful in the porn industry was that I was personable, that I developed relational equity with the directors. I remembered people's names. I showed up on time. I did the little things that often don't get done in that business, because
Mhm.
people don't treat it like a business.
Mhm.
And I didn't do that because I loved what I did. I did that because that's who I was.
Yeah.
And that
Wow.
equated to success for me. But on the other side of that, it's wild to think about, but there's aspects of what I practiced in that industry that made me effective for the kingdom.
Sure. Yeah. Well, it's your DNA, part of that DNA that your mom instilled in you, right? I
Yeah.
mean, it comes out because it's part of you in whatever industry. And so I'm thinking too, as you're talking, I'm wondering, you're in this echo chamber of people doing the same stuff you're doing. So it's not like you had anybody that was kind of like, hey man, there wasn't an accountability partner. It's like, I don't really like what you're doing. Like, you don't need to be doing, like, it's all just kind of in that same shame bucket, and you all are doing this thing together. So maybe for guys that are in whatever shame, is in their life, it certainly may not be the adult film industry, but what were some things guys do, mistakes they make that keep them in that hamster wheel? Like the shame begets shame. So looking back on it, what could you have maybe avoided to snap out of that cycle quicker?
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting, because like if I look back at my life, and like anytime I was exponentially successful
Mm.
in my life, I had someone being hypercritical of me from a
Wow.
constructive standpoint that I trusted enough to speak into my life. So
Mhm.
I not only sought out criticism, but I desired it. And you look at, I played basketball for a long time, and it's like I was a great shooter. I was a great shooter because I had a shooting coach who gave me feedback on my form, And I didn't want to hear I was doing a good job. I wanted to hear, was I executing the form? Was the movement pattern in line with what, what kind of plan that we made to make, my shot selection and, my shooting percentage better? Am I doing the thing? And if I wasn't doing something, if I had an error in my form or I was doing something that was off, I wanted to know because it was detrimental in my output. So I had someone correcting me.
Yeah.
Proverbs 27:6 talks about like the wounds of a friend. It's like
Yeah.
you need someone in your life that is willing to say something that might sting for a while, but it will save you for a lifetime. So
Yeah.
it's like we need that. So for me, it's like I had a shooting coach when I was in basketball. I had a vocal coach regarding like in acting, because I used to say like mater and tater and yonder and
Okay.
and all that good
Yeah.
stuff. But it's like I was working on articulating things in a way that made my communication clear.
Yeah.
And then, in acting and like, with everything, it's like I needed feedback. And then when I was in that industry, I wasn't getting feedback
Yeah.
because your success is often indicative of how far are you willing to go or how much are you willing to compromise? Because
Yeah.
the industry, in the same way, sex trafficking is defined by force, fraud, or coercion. The entire porn industry is based upon force, fraud, coercion, and manipulation. And it's you get to this where if you believe about yourself, the only thing that you can say yes to is selling yourself for sex. You believe, well, I can't say no to someone asking me to do that because that's the only thing I can say yes to. So all of a sudden your no loses its validity and you just stop saying no because
Yeah.
the only thing you can do is say yes. So I think,
And if you factor in lucrative at the same time,
yeah.
that's even a bad, it's a worse recipe.
Yeah, 100%. So I would say like to a guy stuck in that cycle, it's like what from, to back way up to what you
Yeah.
asked me.
Yeah.
Man, if you don't have someone in your life, like
Mm.
you could call it accountability partner, but like this is what a friend looks like. So you need to have someone in your life that loves you enough to tell you when you're screwing up. But also for that to work, they need to actually know you. So like, right, for example, like we live in the most connected generation in the history of time because of social media, yet we are the most disconnected generation in the history of time because of social media. Because what
Yeah.
you can do is you can put on a mask, in the same way I was in this boat where like Tropic Thunder is like I was a dude playing a dude disguised as another dude that didn't know what dude he was, like I
Wow.
you put on this mask and you pretend to be someone you're not, and you pretend to be okay when you're not, and no one actually knows if you're doing okay or knows you at all
Yeah.
because you're
Yeah.
chasing other people's dreams, you're trying to conform your life to someone else's life, and that's why comparison is a thief of joy.
Yeah.
Even if you had the thing that you were comparing your life to, if you had all that, you still wouldn't be happy because you're desiring something that's not for you.
Yeah, I would say too, to the point of having somebody in your life that's honest, that you trust, and that you've also given permission. Though, when you're in the middle of that particular shame or sin, is not the time to start looking for those people. So, to the guy that, because if we're shaming ourselves daily, we're less likely to expose that to somebody. We're not going to go find somebody to call us
Yeah.
out on our shame. So you
Yeah.
got to have, that stuff ready to go. Those people ready to go before you get to be a grease fire.
Yeah, I mean, I had the honor and privilege to doing chapel for multiple NFL teams, and when I'm talking to them, I always talk to them about capacity.
Mm,
Do you want all the capacity that is available to you as a man? If the answer is yes, well, there's certain things that you do that minimizes your effectiveness, and there's certain things you do that improves or elevates your effectiveness. You need people to have your back, in the same way you have, a dietitian that someone's like looking at your blood work because, there's some foods that I might be eating, but maybe I have an allergy to them and I'm doing the right things because someone else is doing them, but I'm not yielding the same results. So I
Right.
need to know what is best for me. So I need someone to examine and critique the things that I'm taking in. I need a
Mhm.
mental coach, but and
Yeah.
ultimately at the end of the day, I need someone that is my friend. But the only way this works is if they actually know you. So
Yeah.
like for me, what changed my life every Friday for almost 10 years, every Friday, I have the same conversation. We call it the hot seat, honest, open, transparent. And it's not, hey, I did wrong things. Maybe I was thinking something that was off kilter. Because if you can confess and examine something when it's small,
Yes.
you won't end up, in the place that you said you would never go.
Yes.
How do you end up going from New York to California, but end up in Canada? Well, if you're
Yeah.
5 degrees off, you'll end up in a place you never intended to be. So
That's
I
good.
need people to course correct me, and I need a barometer of, am I actually doing and living the way that I'm living? What are your hopes? What are your dreams?
Yeah.
What you want to accomplish with your life? Jay
Yeah.
Stringer has this book called Unwanted, and he says that a man, if you can clearly articulate your purpose, you're 70% less likely to adhere to addictive behaviors like
That's good.
pornography, drugs, if you can clearly
Wow.
articulate your purpose. And that's
That's good.
that's what I lead with, man. It's like men know like there's things they shouldn't be doing, but like in the same way, like good parenting, don't tell your kids what not to do, tell them what to do. In the same way, men need to know you are like, yes, you're robbing yourself of your purpose, but man, there's stuff that you need to be doing that you're not doing when you're doing things you ought not doing. You're robbing your family, your community, like everyone you have influence over. You're robbing them from the best version of yourself when you're
Mm.
doing things that minimize your character and your integrity and your capacity. So
Yeah.
that's the conversation
That's
that I have
good.
with the Chargers.
That's
I'm like, hey,
yeah.
who wants to be everything that they were
That's
created to
good.
be?
Yeah.
Okay, so like stop doing these things,
Right.
because if you don't, you're robbing yourself of all the person you could be.
Yeah, that's well said. That's the good stuff. I mean, yeah, that resonates with everybody. And I would say, if we could go into, hundreds of statistics about the damage pornography does to men and women, but let's stick to the men theme. But I was in the research, I guess 300% is the increase in risk for marriages when there's pornography in the relationship somehow, when one member is addicted. Between 18 and maybe 50, those ages are, what is it, 70%? 60 to 70% of men have been exposed or are addicted to, have
Yeah,
viewed
it's
it in
it's
the last
crazy.
3 months. It's crazy. So I guess my question, without going into all those stats, what is it that you see in the work? Because I know you work with guys too and help guys now.
Yeah.
What is it that gets people out of that toxic relationship they have with that addiction or with that particular temptation? Like, what got you out of the industry? How did you just like get to the end of your rope? And I know got pretty dark. So help me understand your situation, and then kind of how guys get out of it.
Yeah. So I'll kind of touch on, you're right
Yeah.
on the data. So, in America, 50% of divorces state that pornography is the major catalyst for the divorce.
Mm.
And then you look at the data, fatherlessness is the primary contributor and best predictor of crime, poverty, abortion. Like you look at it, and fatherlessness is the primary contributor to all the things that we would say are the biggest problems
Yeah.
in America and in our world.
Mm.
um, you know, Regarding revenue, makes more money than the NBA, NFL, Major League Baseball all
Yeah.
combined. 35%
Yeah.
of all the data transferred on the internet on a daily basis is pornography. And I'm speaking
Mm.
at an event next month or this month, in Oregon. It's myself and the CEO of Barna. And since 2016, consumption is up by 400% by people who identify as Christians. And the age demographic 18 to 24, 92% of guys 18 to 24 and 67% of women 18 to 24 are consuming pornography on a monthly basis at minimum. And we know data is only good as people are honest. So I assume that it's
Yeah.
worse. So saying
Wow.
all that to say, yes, it is an epidemic in this world. But
Mhm.
to your point earlier, it's born in an identity crisis. So I would say, what did I need to know? Well, the way that I got to the end of my rope was that, Romans 2:4 talks about it's God's love, his kindness, his patience that leads us into repentance. And I think in a way, God allowed me to experience everything that I thought was satisfying my soul to understand that it didn't.
Mm.
And for me, like in 2012, I won Performer of the Year. And I'd eclipsed $1 million earned, and I had done all this stuff, and a lot of people knew my name. But like winning Performer of the Year, that was kind of like, because I was like the industry, and the people in industry voted that I was the best. And I thought if I was chosen and I was exalted, then I would feel it, that would in some way, in a weird way, I thought that would mitigate the depths that I had in my heart and make me feel like I was somebody.
Mm-hmm.
It would make the pain go away. It would make the feelings of inadequacy go away. And when I won the award and I didn't feel better, but I actually felt worse,
Mm-hmm.
then I started contemplating taking my life. And it was through me trying to take my life, I met a person that simply saw me in the middle of my brokenness, and I saw me in the middle of my brokenness and said my name and asked me if I was okay. And very much like Acts 16, Acts 16, there's a situation where Paul and disciples, they were preaching the gospel, they were baptizing people, casting out demons, and all of a sudden the culture was like, hey, like they're causing an uproar, and it's like they're messing with our money, and they
Mm-hmm.
threw him in jail. And while they were in jail, there was an earthquake, and the jail cell doors opened up, and there was a Roman guard that was his job was to keep people where they were put. And then he saw the doors open up, and he thought, okay, everyone's going
Mm-hmm.
to leave, and corporal punishment was the expectation. So he grabs a sword and goes to take his life, and Paul simply says, "Don't harm yourself. I'm right here." And his response was, "What is it that I need to do to be saved?" And
That's
and
good.
he gets saved, and then his whole
That's
family gets
good.
saved. And in the same way, like there was a bank teller, I there were on the memo of the check, it clearly said what I was being paid for, and I would normally avoid the line. I would avoid going into the bank. I would just do mobile deposit, Dropbox, whatever. But on this day, I wanted someone to look at me in the face and tell me I was worthless or gross or disgusting, so that it would justify my belief so I could do the thing I wanted to do. And instead, she saw me and said my name. And it was the first time that I heard my name in over a year, because in that industry, you go by a pseudonym, you don't go by your real name. And that caused me to call my mom, and she said everything that I didn't think she would. She told me that she loved me, that I would always be her son, that I was better than this, and just to please, please, please come home. So I quit the
Wow.
industry, and I did. But it was, 2 years later, I meet this girl that, after I tell her, I'm like, hey, I've done all this porn, and I'm this kid that his daddy didn't want. And she's like, well, I'm so sorry that happened to you, but I want you to know, and you need to know, you're not defined by the worst thing you've ever done, and you're not defined by the greatest thing you'll ever do. You're not the author of yourself, so you don't
Come
get to
on.
define you.
Oof.
And that changed the rest of my life, because again, my identity was based upon things that I've done and the way that people had interacted with me, like what I didn't
Mm-hmm.
have, what I had done, and the way that people treated me. And yes, those things were mentally and emotionally like traumatizing to me, but that didn't dictate who I was. And she challenged that, and I saw hope in a hopeless situation, and she invited me to church, and I heard the gospel. And I
Mm.
And it's like it was in that. And it was so interesting because like when I heard the gospel, it was this sermon about 2 Samuel chapter 9, and there's this interaction with David and Mephibosheth and a guard named Ziba, and Mephibosheth was a son of Jonathan, and he was in hiding because because his grandfather was Saul. He was in line to be king, and if anyone that was outside of the kingdom that maybe had, a thought of them having access to the kingdom, they would potentially cause an upheaval and try to overtake the kingdom. So they were generally hunted down and killed. But David was different. And he was like, hey, I'm actually not going to have you killed. He brought him into his kingdom and said, I want you to know I'm going to restore your grandfather's land to you. I'm going to give you a seat at my table, and I want you to be part of this kingdom. And he didn't know how to respond. And 2 Samuel chapter 9, verse 8 says, essentially, don't you know who I am? He referred to himself as a dead dog. He's like,
Yeah.
and that I was like, yeah, me, that's me. Like I'm hearing the gospel, and that's awesome. And what Jesus did, incredible for whoever that's for. But don't you know who I am? Like I'm not invited.
Yeah.
And then he read Hebrews 12:2, and it said, with joy set before him, he endured the cross, and something about the comprehension of it was love by God to send his son into this world and live a perfect life, face temptation, but never sin, and then get brutally, beaten and spat on and go to the cross and die. But on the way to the cross, because he's omniscient and he's all knowing, he's not only experiencing what's happening, but he's aware of the anguish that awaits him, and he had joy in his heart. Why? Because he was doing it so that you would have access to forever.
That's right.
That's how much he loves you. And when I understood that was the Father's heart, and I had access to a Father in heaven that loved me that much, the thing that made the most sense to me ever in my life was to get on my face, repent, and lay down my life and say, like, I don't know the words, but I know that you're God, and I repent of my sins, and I surrender my life to you. I pray that your Spirit fills me, and then from there, that changed me. And because again, like at the end of the day, what you believe about Jesus is the most important thing about you. Because if you believe that Jesus went to the cross and died for you, that he is Lord, then now he is sovereign over your life, and he doesn't leave you without a plan. The Bible clearly articulates who you are to be as a man so that you can live out an individual and unique purpose. So if you live in your purpose, you're going to experience satisfaction that is not available to you outside of Christ, because you don't know the author and you don't know the plan.
Well, can I ask a question right there? I got to ask a question because I can see as your journey unfolds and you meet the bank teller and your eyes are kind of opened a little bit to some hope. And then you meet this person 2 years later, and you go to church, like,
and our name just happens to be Hope.
Wow. And then so you went from not knowing Christ and this, living in darkness, living on the other team really, to this different life now with different eyes. What about the guys? I mean, 70% of Christian men deal with this temptation, this sin, this pornography, this issue, and we all supposedly know the truth, right?
Yeah.
So you did a radical transformation because all of a sudden you had the scales fell off and you're like, okay, this is a new way of living, and I'm all about this. What about guys who have been Christian and we know the truth, but we're not free? What's going on?
Yeah, I mean, it's like freedom rightly understood, or liberty rightly understood, because Christian liberty, it really summarized in Titus 2. So through saying no to ungodliness, you develop an appetite for righteousness. So Titus 2, specifically verses 11 through 17, it talks about that, where like through saying no to ungodliness, you develop this hunger for righteousness. And in the same way, it's like, as an American, you have access to all this food, all this snacks, and all this stuff, and there's most certainly hungry, starving people throughout the U.S. But for the most part, there's a lot of people that have access to everything they want, everything they need. And if you didn't have anything to eat for a month, and then you had a Ritz cracker. That would be the most
Best
delicious
cracker.
thing
That's
you've
right.
ever had in your life. And in the same way, when you starve your flesh from things that are not good for you, and you become satisfied and satiated in God's word, in the person of Jesus, this satisfaction that you experience is greater than the sin you've experienced. And while you might always have this, this desire to sin, or you
Proclivity.
might have
Yeah.
this curiosity towards pornography, the pull, it's like the I like the way, I explain this to teenagers, and I think it's just a great analogy where it's like
Yeah.
you got two hungry dogs, and there's
Yeah.
they're on one chain, and whatever dog you feed is going to pull the other dog in that direction. So in the same way, it's like if you feed your spirit will be tough enough to outweigh the desire to sin, because you understand that satisfaction. And that doesn't mean we're perfect by any means. We'll never, until glory, we will
Sure.
continue to struggle. Romans 7 talks about this cognitive dissonance where, why do I do the things I don't want to do, and I struggle to do the things that I want to do? Like, why? Well, there's an enemy that wants to destroy you, and you have your flesh. So simultaneously, you're wanting to do one thing while struggling with another.
Yeah.
So I mean, so I would say that the reason that people struggle is you're trying to white knuckle it and just stop doing it, and you're not wanting to do it because you don't like, you're not supposed to. In contrast of asking yourself a question, especially as a man, which is it's just hard because you gotta dig into your emotions.
Sure.
Why? Why do I want to watch it?
Yeah.
Like it's deeper and bigger than I'm just a dude. That's a lie. That's Satan talking. I'm just a dude.
Hmm.
That's Satan talking. The
Yep.
reality is I have a desire in my heart for intimacy that is from God for God. But
Yeah.
because of this world, Romans 12:2 talks about you're either being conformed by the world or transformed by the renewing of your mind. That's not a one-time thing. You don't,
No.
your mind does not become, impenetrable
Sure.
by the world when you decide to follow Jesus. Your eyes are open and you have a new heart, but you have to inform your heart. And if you inform your heart and your mind with the wrong things, you will desire the wrong
Yeah.
things. But what happens along the way, there was this something happened to you, or you thought wrongly about something, or you experienced rejection, and pornography was an option. And the most dangerous thing about porn is it works.
Right.
That it makes you feel good.
It
You
fills
don't
whatever deficits you're
Yeah.
experiencing.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
You don't, if you are afraid of rejection, there's no one that's going to reject you. If you want to be chosen, like you remove any obstacle along the way. But this is Satan's counterfeit.
Yeah.
It's the apple,
That's
in the
right.
garden. It's saying it's delicious, it's good for eating. It's not
Yeah.
a big deal. And you in the same way, because like in the garden, like Satan didn't say, well, God's a liar. He said, did God really say?
Right.
And if you can get to the point where you're rationalizing, well, is this really bad?
Right.
Is God really enough? What could it hurt? One more time,
Yeah. And
and
the power of carrying a secret around too. Like some guys just like to know that they know something nobody else knows. Like this is my secret, right? I'm
yeah,
getting something fulfilled that's vacant in me, but
yeah,
also nobody's going to know. This is just me and my thing. This is just me, right? It's not hurting anybody. There's nobody knows. Like this is my vice.
and
You hear a lot
and
of
I,
vice talk.
yeah, and it's like, like there's really significant amounts of neuroscience that's readily available to anyone that wants to research this, and it impacts your frontal lobe. And what your
Mm-hmm.
frontal lobe does, it is the thing in which allows you to have, perseverance or determination, and that it allows you to have grit in a specific way where you can exhibit resilience. Where, I want to have a donut, but I know that I've already had one and I shouldn't have two. And it's like, well, then you rationalize it like, I'm going to do it anyway. And it's like, so that's the part of the brain that it impacts. It impacts. So what's so interesting about that? So during the Civil War in London, they started printing, the printing press had just taken off, and they were printing pornography, and they were sending this pornography to the soldiers in the Civil War. And they had to bring in chaplains, for the soldiers in the Civil War. And it wasn't because they were struggling with the death of their comrades. It was because they were so pornography was so pervasive. And like, why is that important? Well, as a soldier, it impacts your integrity, it impacts your resilience. So there were people that were not being the soldiers that they were called to be because the ineffectiveness that pornography was doing to their brain. So in a real way, it makes it harder for you to say no to the things that you say out loud that you want to say yes to. And it's not a coincidence. Like, that is Satan's game. Satan wants to destroy your prudency so that you will say yes to him and you will say no to God, because every time you say yes to something, you also say no to everything else.
That's right. Wow. That's just clinical data. You're just talking science right there. Argue with that, right? So you're working with guys, and I want to get into your book too. And I know I want to go into some of the lies that maybe resonate most with your readers from what you've heard. I guess we can make that all one question, really. So the guys that are reading it, that you're hearing from, that you're getting feedback about, what are some of the main influential lies that you're seeing resonate most? And then do we have guys that are just, it's got to get to broken and rock bottom before they get out of this cycle of sexual sin? Or are you seeing some success stories where maybe something else got them to wake up?
Yeah, it's wild. It's like, because most people, that read my book, the assumption is the book is about pornography. But like, to your point, it's not. It's actually about purpose.
Yeah.
So it's like the 7 lies, like they're like, one of the lies that we examine is intimacy, but just addressing what is intimacy.
Mm-hmm.
Well, intimacy based on a good biblical theology would be, intimacy for the Christian is not sex, while sex is part of intimacy, and intimacy and sex exist in the same ecosystem.
Mm-hmm.
Intimacy by definition is proximity to God. And if we are not, if we're not seeing intimacy and love through the understanding that the closer we are to God, the more clearly we can see, and through our relationship with God, we can love and see in the way that he designed us to, in the same way that, Apple has an operating system, over your iPhone, and, you get updates whether you want them or not. They change those emojis whether you want them or not. Why? Because there's someone overseeing that operating system. And at the same time, like, if you try to use your phone underwater, it's not going to work. Why? There's an original design and original intent for your phone. If there's a, if you get water in it, or if there's a virus that gets in it, it doesn't function in the way that the designer intended it to work. So it doesn't work at all. So sex, rightly understood, is a beautiful thing that both connects you to your spouse and is symbolic in Christ in the church. It creates connectivity, procreation, and allows you to experience oneness in the same way that Christ wants you to be one with him. But that's it. That's it in a nutshell, man. It's like,
is that a big one? Is that a big one you're hearing from guys? They're not getting enough intimacy as they would like to define it at home. This is their outlet, obviously. But then how do you spin that, or not spin, but how do you clarify that to them that, look, intimacy is where you line up with God? And let's just talk to Christian men right now, but where you line up with God. And then just because your spouse isn't giving you what you quote unquote want or need, like, there's another kind of intimacy. Yeah.
But here's the tough pill to swallow. Is what you want and what you need based on a lie that you've told yourself that you saw from porn? Because porn is because
True.
porn is a fictitious representation of sex and intimacy, meaning that it's a lie.
Yeah.
My kids were watching, Paw Patrol, and they think if a dog can drive a car and shoot a gun, like, not going to happen,
Sure.
So it's like, in the same way, people are developing appetites, and they're feeling insatiable for things that their palate was never designed to have
Wow.
an appetite for. So
That's
that's
good.
why, there's people right now that, man, I abstained. I talk in colleges all the time where there's guys that are like, I remain pure. I'm a virgin, but I struggled with porn for the last 10 years. And then I got married, or I'm dating this girl, and it's like, I love her. She loves the Lord. I love the Lord, but she's just not my type. And this is happening in marriage. And then there's this struggle with erectile dysfunctions, like in,
Yep.
Gen Z marriages, where like they're saying, hey, I'm having trouble
Yeah.
being intimate with my spouse. Why? Well, these things that you call fetishes are not preferences, they're perversions.
Mm-hmm.
So you got to call things what they are. Like, in the same world where, whatever label you want to
Yeah.
say, when you call something different than what it is, it loses its gravity.
Yeah.
So people who are saying, well, I just got a thing for, whatever
Yep.
part, you fill in the blank. I just got a
Right.
thing for X. Well, you don't have a thing for X, because that is not what love and intimacy, like, yes, the female body is beautiful. Women
Right.
are beautiful, yes. But when you take a part of a woman's body and you make that like your thing, you didn't get that from God. You didn't get that from the Bible, and you didn't get that from your own biology. You got that from pornography. And pornography, by definition, it comes out of the Greek New Testament. They were sketching it on walls in,
Yeah.
2000 BC in Mesopotamia. Then they took pictures of it and they make sculptures of it, and then it grew into what it is today. So what I'm trying to say is,
Yeah.
when you believe a lie to be true, it becomes true to you, and you have formed a way of thinking around sex that is fictitious. So of course, your desires are not going to be met by an actual person, because what you don't know is those actors, because I've been there, that's an actor and an actress, and they're being paid to be there.
Yeah.
They probably don't want to be there. The guy's taking erectile dysfunction medication. The girl's using some kind of numbing cream.
Sure.
There's a director telling the people what to do. There's cinematography, there's editing, and then the end product is a fantasy. It's a
Right.
depiction of something that the world has said this is what sex is, and then now you have an appetite for this end product that you can't get because it's not real.
Yeah.
So that's
Yeah.
why it drives you crazy, and you keep going after it,
It's
because
crazy.
the desire that you have, you can never actually have.
Yeah. And when you objectify something, I think you become desensitized to the real thing. So, like, to
Yeah.
your point, guys that are having erectile dysfunction with their spouse, it's because they've objectified a female, and now their brain's desensitized. So when they have what's really supposed to be intimate connection, they don't know that. Their brain is
Yeah.
fooled into thinking this is just another object, and it does nothing for you because it's not your perversion that you're looking for. And so
Yeah, I
that's
mean,
just a vicious cycle, bro.
yeah, I mean, we've opened the can, so I'll keep going, and you can cut it out if you want.
Sure,
But
sure.
but just the reality, like, I'm in November, I'm speaking at a cultural conference, and at this cultural conference, I'm answering the question to Christians: is masturbation sin? And what I tell to people, Christian or non-Christian, I was like, well, does the Bible definitively say that masturbation is sin? No, but contextually, if you use the context of the text, what am I called to be? I'm called to exhibit self-control. Whose is my body? Well, I'm a living sacrifice, and a reasonable response to God's mercy is to live as a living sacrifice. My body is not my own; it was bought at a price. So, understanding that that's true, and then sexual immorality is not only sin; it's sin against my own body, and we're called to take every thought captive and make it obedient to Christ. So does that behavior line up with the, the self-control and the sacrificial living that we are called to live in? Obviously, no. But I would say, even on a more practical basis, like, is masturbation, like, is it practically beneficial for my spouse? No. You're practicing finishing quickly, and you're forming a relationship with your hand, and more often than not, you're watching pornography.
I was going to say, yeah, what you're doing while you're doing that is sinful. I mean, all of that.
But also, like, does any of that, like, would you say, like, Matt, like, you like, just let's call it what it is. Like, is masturbation selfish or not? Obviously selfish. So is that, beneficial for marriage? No. So is something, if the biblical, explanation for sin, it's like this bullseye, right? So if you get 1/100th outside of the bullseye, then that's sin. So does masturbation fall in that category? Of course it does.
Right. Well, I know there's a scripture, and I can't recite it, but I didn't dream this. And I know there's one that talks about when a man senselessly wastes his seed, or the seed. I don't know where that is in the Bible, but I know it's in there. So does that contextually fall into that argument?
I mean, you could definitely paint that picture, but I would say, like, that would be an example of you being reckless with, your seed, in the same way that, like, if we're gonna say, like, obviously this is a whole other conversation, but, like, if you want to talk about IVF and you want to exclude masturbation, it's like that, in a sense, is the same, topical conversation.
Sure.
Because
that's good.
It's opportunity for life.
That's true. That's true. That's good. Well, I'm glad you touched on that. I'm glad we didn't plan on that, but I'm glad you said that, because this all obviously coexists. Like, this masturbation, this temptation, sexual sin, pornography, like, it all overlaps, and it's created this monstrosity of a debilitator in the nuclear family and the marriage specifically. And it's created this multi-billion-dollar industry. And so I don't know how we get it to go away, other than we change men from the inside out, which is what you're doing.
Well,
that's what happened to you too. So what are give me a couple other lies in your book, 7 Lies That Ruin Your Life. Like, give me a couple other lies that you think guys have the most problem with right now.
Yeah, I mean, I think, like, purpose is so important, just like we talked about. Like, if you know your purpose, then you don't spend time. Like, when you know your purpose, you don't spend time doing things that erode or destroy, or distract from your purpose. But I think another one is really important. It's like this God of self, and so it's the second chapter, and it kind of points to this way of thinking that, while in Exodus 32, like, Moses is, like, up on Mount Sinai, like, getting the 10 Commandments, and he comes down, and Aaron and his misfits have created this golden sculpture that looks like a cow. And what's so interesting about that is, not only were they referring to that golden calf as Elohim, which means a god. There are times in the Bible where it was referring to a pagan god when saying Elohim, but never, which they did, was if you're calling something Yahweh. If you're calling, if you're talking about Yahweh, if you say Yahweh, it is clear who you're talking about. And they said, they called this golden calf Yahweh, the one who delivered them out of Egypt. And in the same way, it's like, it's so easy to, if you put your preference and, whatever proclivity that you have that is not in line with God's word, inside of the bucket in which you say, my life is devoted to following Jesus, and I am surrendered to Jesus. Jesus is Lord of my life. Well, what area of your life are you still Lord of your life?
Yeah.
Because if from the garden, if there's an area of your life where you're trying to maintain autonomy, where you are in charge, you don't have the capacity for lordship. So either You are surrendered and in submission to the Lord Jesus, or you've given your life over to Satan. There is no in between. You know, so
Mhm.
I mean that's the thing that you need to like really, as a follower of Jesus. What area of my life am I not surrendering to Jesus? And again, why? Like,
Mhm.
why am I holding on so tightly? And that's why, like, we did this documentary. So we did a documentary called Unmentionable. So it's an 8-part podcast series where we chronologically track my story and the growth of the porn industry. I couldn't recommend this more. And I spoke at the University of Georgia, and I had the guy who was running chapel there. I had him like, man, get these students to listen to this. And when I got there were so many students that were like, dude, I've been watching porn for 10 years. And after hearing what I heard, I couldn't stomach it anymore. And as
Wow.
bad as I wanted to click the button, I just couldn't.
Yeah.
So praise God to that. But what it
That's awesome.
is like when you pair empirical data with personal testimony, what you have is a burden of truth. Like, so now you have a burden
Yeah.
on you. Now that I know something is as bad as it is,
Accountable. Yeah.
and what it contributes to, like
Yeah.
now that I know with clarity, with significant empirical data, that what it contributes to, now now I'm wrestling with a different thing.
That's right.
And that's why knowledge is power. So I would say like that
Yeah.
lie
That's huge.
that lie where it's like at the end of the day, like what feels like, if it's unmentionable to you, that's the thing that you need to say out loud to
Yeah.
somebody,
Oh,
because that is the thing where you like, if you do what you've always done, you'll get what you've always got.
that's
But if you're
right.
but if you're willing to do the thing you've never done, which is say the thing out loud to someone who loves you, that loves
Mhm.
Jesus. Like
Yeah.
find somebody and say the thing, whether it was something that happened to you or something that you did, because
Yeah.
if you don't, that thing that you feel like you're going to suppress you're never going to tell anyone,
Yeah.
it's going to grow inside of you, and it's going to lead you to a place and a way of thinking that is so dark and so,
Mhm.
just
Right.
corrupting, and you'll
Yeah.
end up in a place that you never, you'll end up like Peter doing the thing
Yeah.
he said you would never do.
That's right.
But the gospel is that in spite of Peter doing the thing he would never do, Jesus asked you, "Hey, do you love me?"
Yeah.
Okay, well, if you love me, remember you're not a fisherman. You're not what you do. You are who I called you to be. And
Yeah.
if you remember who I called you to be, I said to go feed my sheep. And he
Mhm.
did. Why? Because he surrendered, he submitted, and
That's
he
right.
allowed the love that Jesus had for him to cover his shame, to heal his heart, and to propel him to live
Yeah.
differently.
That's so good. I mean, that's powerful. And I bet to the point of the guy that had, watched it and knows exactly what that industry behind closed doors is contributing to. And some of the victims that are, I mean, this is just modern day slavery in a lot of senses. And, the trafficking, sex trafficking, and where those kids come from, the girls come from, even boys. But man, if people can wrap their brain around that, yeah, you're right. You're either part of the solution or part of the problem. And when you
Yeah.
click that button, you're part of the problem. So I think that's just powerful. And you're doing, I mean, you're clearly doing what you're called to do, and you're able to articulate your purpose, to your point earlier, which makes you a force to be reckoned with for the enemy. So
Yeah.
for the sake
And
of your time, yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
I was gonna say, man, I was like, if there's a verse to cling on to, like as men, so 1 Corinthians 16, verse 13, it says, "Be
Yep.
watchful." So I need to pay attention to what I pay attention to. So fix your focus, and then it says, "Stand firm in the faith."
Yeah.
So where I plant my feet matters, and the foundation I'm standing on matters,
Mhm.
because what I believe to be most true will
Mhm.
determine how I live my life. And it says, act like men, be strong. Where does your strength come from? It doesn't come from you.
Mhm.
John 16:33 says, I've told you all these things so that in me, you can have peace. But in
Mhm.
this world, you will face tribulations, trials, trouble. But you can take heart. You can be of
Yeah.
good courage. You can be of good cheer because I've overcome the world. So peace and courage don't come from yourself. They come from Christ, and
That's
they
right.
are in abundance. And then lastly, it says, let all that you do be done in love. So it's a reminder again, like Romans 12, a reasonable response for God's mercy, right? So mercy is the withholding of what I deserve.
Yeah.
Grace is the gift of what I don't deserve.
Yeah.
The gift of God is the grace that he's shown to us. So for me to let all that I do be done in love is for me to fully understand that while I was an enemy of God, Jesus went to the cross and suffered and died for me so that I could live, John 10:10, not live a mediocre life, to live in the abundance of him. John 15, your life, if you remain in me and I in you, your life will bear not a little bit of fruit, much fruit. You were designed for more. You were made for more. And if you're not living in more, you're feeling like you're less. So the discontentment that you feel, the disconnection that you have, is because you're doing something that doesn't align with who you're created to be, and you're distanced from something that you need most. So what does it look like?
Wow.
Be watchful. Pay attention to what I pay attention to. Stand firm in the faith. Act like men. Be strong. Let all you do be done in love. That's what it means to be a man.
Dude, it's one of my favorite. That might be my favorite verse, 1 Corinthians 16:13. I've had that just everywhere I go has been the last couple years. So yeah, that's a great overarching. Now, I will say, I want to say his name's Josh Howerton. He's a pastor.
That's my pastor.
I heard. Oh, you're kidding.
That's my pastor. Yes, sir.
Oh, you're kidding. I didn't know that. Okay,
Yeah.
we couldn't have planned that, but he preached at Joby Martin's church a few weeks ago, and he said a believer's birthmark is a bullseye. And so the enemy loves to put a bullseye on us because he knows if he can separate us from God and he can wreck the Christian man, he's accomplished most of the battle.
Yeah.
So, what you're doing is powerful. I appreciate all that because I know you got zero margin in your days and your weeks, and I appreciate you coming here and you're out doing the work. You're not just playing church. You're actually a pastor as well. Am I right in saying that? You're actually
so right
preach
now,
a lot.
so right now I'm not on staff anywhere. So I lead a nonprofit called Momentum. So historically I've been on staff at churches. So I was on staff at Life Church. So Craig Rochelle's organization,
up in Edmond or which one?
So I was actually in between Edmond and Norman. So I was in Moore, Oklahoma.
Cool.
So I was in Moore. So learned a ton there, and then served as a teaching pastor for a long time when we were in Iowa. But since we moved to Dallas, I faithfully serve, at Lake Point, and Josh Howerton's my pastor, and I love that, he teaches the Bible every week, and my family loves it there. But for me, I preach. I'm called to the church, so it's like
I was going to say you're out talking to churches, you're out talking to universities, athletic teams,
so I do
teenagers.
Absolutely. Like that's so I have an apostolic and evangelistic calling on my life, and I think most certainly after a few years I'll settle down and I'm called to pastor, but right now I'm called to preach, not in one place but many places. So
I love it, man. There's no shelf life on the message of identity, so just keep doing it, man. We appreciate you, and we know we're going to have the link on where to get the book. We're going to have the link on the documentary for Unmentionable. We're going to have the link for the nonprofit Momentum, and man, brother, it's been a blessing to get to know you. You got one more thing just for the audience, just to part with, just something like gavel drop moment. This is your mic.
Yeah, I mean, I would just say, like, there was a time in my life where I believed that because of things that I've done, that I was disqualified from everything that my heart desired that was good. I'd never be a husband, never be a father, never contribute to the world, and to leave, to lead people to live meaningful lives, to contribute to the world in a way that leads to positive change. So I would just challenge the thing in your heart that has died but yet won't go away in your mind, that's God. And who God is that he will do exceedingly abundantly more than you can ever hope, dream, or imagine. Ephesians 3:20, that is who he is. That's not a progressive gospel. That is who he is. His promises are always true. So if God has put it on your heart, don't allow the thing that you did or what was done to you to stop you from pursuing the thing that your heart's gravitating towards. Build the business, make the phone call, start the small group, get the degree, whatever it is, fill in the application, ask her on the date, whatever it is, do the thing, because the thing that scares you most, that voice is not God, it's Satan.
That's right.
And what I've come to know is that, as my wife said to me, you're not defined by the worst thing you've ever done or the greatest thing you'll ever do. God alone defines who you are, and he's called you for more. So men, there's never been a time culture has needed you more to become the person you were created to be. We're called to rule and reign over the earth, and by not doing something, by sitting by being passive, by seeing a problem and telling others that, man, someone needs to do something. Something that I come to know really early on is, like, if you see a problem and no one's doing anything about it, the reason that you're noticing it is because you're the one
That's right.
that is called to fix it. So
It's
do
good,
the thing,
man.
say the thing.
So good. Well, audience, he has been the one and only Joshua Broome. We've been last in line. Be blessed.